unforgiving winter of 1873, the close-knit German immigrant community of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, spoke of young Emma Richter in hushed, fearful tones. She was just 11 years old, a quiet girl with an unnervingly pale complexion and a mind that defied all understanding. Emma could instantly calculate the day of the week for any date in recorded history, recall entire conversations word for word after a single hearing, and knew the exact number of steps between any two buildings in her neighborhood without ever having measured them. What modern science might now identify as an extraordinary neurological condition was, to the people of 1873, either a divine miracle or something far more sinister. But when Emma began to wield her astonishing abilities to unearth long-buried secrets, foretell fatal accidents, and recount intimate details of crimes that supposedly no living soul had witnessed, the community's initial awe swiftly curdled into pure terror. By the time spring arrived, 3 men would be dead. A family would flee into the night, and Emma Richter herself would vanish without a trace. All that remained was a leather-bound journal, filled with numbers and calculations that no one dared to decipher. Before we delve deeper into the chilling saga of Emma Richter and the dark truths her exceptional mind uncovered in Milwaukee's bustling German quarter, please consider subscribing to our channel and activating that notification bell. We bring you the most haunting historical mysteries every single week, and we'd love for you to drop a comment below, letting us know where in the world you're watching from. These unsettling stories often transpired in communities just like yours, perhaps closer to home than you'd imagine. The residents of Brewery Town were oblivious that Emma's unique gift was about to expose a decade-old tapestry of lies, treachery, and murder, and that her unsettling mathematical precision would soon become their community's most horrifying nightmare. Milwaukee's German Quarter in 1873 was a vibrant hub of red brick breweries, humble wooden houses, and the harmonious blend of German and English voices carried on the brisk Wisconsin air. This community of nearly 8,000 German immigrants had meticulously recreated their own little Bavaria along the shores of Lake Michigan. It was a place teeming with lively beer gardens, aromatic traditional bakeries, and the comforting rhythms of old-world life, lovingly transplanted onto American soil. Men toiled in the renowned breweries, Schlitz, Best, and a multitude of smaller establishments that cemented Milwaukee's reputation, while their wives cultivated gardens yielding the same vegetables their grandmothers had nurtured in the distant Rhineland. Heinrich and Greta Richter had journeyed from Bavaria in 1861, arriving with aspirations of prosperity and their infant daughter, Emma. Heinrich quickly secured stable employment as a brewmaster at the Kellner Brewery, a moderately sized operation supplying the growing city's insatiable thirst for beer. Greta contributed to their income by taking in laundry and mending, her deft fingers working by candlelight long after Emma had been tucked into bed in their modest but well-kept home on Galena Street. The Richters were, in every other respect, an ordinary couple, except for their daughter. Emma had entered the world during the arduous Atlantic crossing, 3 weeks ahead of schedule and so tiny that the ship's doctor doubted her survival. Yet, survive she did. She remained delicate and pale, with unusually large gray eyes that seemed to absorb every detail around her with an unsettling intensity. As a toddler, she rarely cried or sought attention, content instead to sit silently in corners, observing and listening as the adult world unfolded. By her 4th birthday, Emma's parents began to notice something truly extraordinary. She could flawlessly recount entire conversations she had merely overheard days prior, reproducing the precise inflections and accents of each speaker. Emma counted everything: the intricate stitches in her mother's embroidery, the exact number of steps from their front door to the local bakery, and the precise intervals between the brewery whistles marking the start and end of each workday. When Heinrich introduced her to basic arithmetic, she grasped complex mathematical concepts with astonishing speed, solving problems mentally faster than he could complete them on paper. The German community initially regarded Emma's abilities with a complex mixture of pride and apprehension. Old Mrs. Brennan, who claimed ancestral memories of witch trials, would instinctively cross herself whenever Emma's calculating gray eyes focused on her. However, Father Koller, the robust Bavarian priest overseeing their small Catholic parish, declared Emma's gifts a divine blessing, proclaiming her a child chosen to manifest God's wisdom in their new American community. The winter of 1872 had been exceptionally harsh, with temperatures plummeting so severely that Lake Michigan froze solid for the first time in memory. Brewery workers huddled around coal stoves, their breath fogging even indoors, while their wives struggled tirelessly to keep their families warm and fed through the long, brutal months. It was amidst this period of isolated hardship that Emma's extraordinary capabilities began to take on a far darker, more ominous dimension, though no one yet grasped the true horror that was unfolding. Emma had developed a peculiar habit of sitting by the small kitchen window, meticulously observing the neighbors' daily routines with the same intense focus she applied to intricate mathematical problems. She started discerning patterns, not merely in numbers, but in the subtle nuances of human behavior. Mr. Kruger, for instance, invariably walked to the brewery using the same route, taking precisely 247 steps, except on Wednesdays, when he diverged onto a different path requiring 284 steps. Mrs. Fisher consistently hung her laundry in a particular sequence, yet when her husband worked late at the mill, her routine changed entirely. These observations might have been dismissed as the mere eccentricities of an unusual child, had Emma not begun to articulate her findings in ways that left the adults increasingly disconcerted. The subtle shift from mere curiosity to pervasive dread began on a bleak February morning in 1873. Emma sat calmly at the kitchen table, methodically eating her breakfast, while her mother prepared her father's lunch pail. Suddenly, Emma looked up and declared, "Mr. Dietrich will not return from the brewery today. He will die at exactly 14 minutes past 2 o'clock. Greta nearly dropped the tin pail she was holding. "Emma, dear God, what a dreadful thing to say. Why would you think such a thing?" Emma's gray eyes remained fixed on her mother's face with that unsettling intensity. "He has been consuming from the small brown bottle for 17 days. Yesterday, he consumed 3 times more than usual. His steps were uneven, 251, instead of his usual 244. When an individual alters their established patterns by more than 10%, a significant event typically occurs within 72 hours. Mr. Dietrich's pattern changed by 12%. The calculation is straightforward." Hinrich, who had been in the process of donning his heavy wool coat, paused, staring at his daughter. Johann Dietrich was indeed a heavy drinker, but no more so than half the men in the German quarter. The notion that Emma had been meticulously counting his steps and monitoring his drinking habits was unsettling enough, but her serene mathematical certainty regarding his impending death sent a chill through both parents that had nothing to do with the biting Wisconsin winter. "You must not utter such things, Emma," Hinrich stated firmly. "It is not appropriate for a child to speak of death." Emma simply nodded and resumed her breakfast, but her parents exchanged worried glances over her bowed head. They had grown accustomed to their daughter's unusual observations, yet this pronouncement felt different, darker, and far more specific than her typical mathematical declarations. Precisely at 14 minutes past 2 that afternoon, Johann Dietrich collapsed in the brewery's malt room. Dr. Muller officially attributed the cause of death to heart failure, brought on by what he determined to be chronic alcohol poisoning. The brewery workers who found him noted his strange behavior in recent weeks, including increased drinking and visible signs of severe anxiety. But what truly unsettled them was the timing. Emma Richter's prediction had been accurate to the minute. News of Emma's grim prophecy spread through the German quarter like smoke from a chimney fire. Some dismissed it as a mere coincidence, but others remembered the pale girl with the calculating eyes and began to wonder what other secrets she might have observed during her silent vigils at the kitchen window. The Richter family soon found themselves the subject of hushed conversations and wary glances as they walked to church or visited the market. Father Koller, who had previously lauded Emma's gifts as divine, now, seemed less convinced. When Heinrich approached him after Sunday Mass, seeking guidance about his daughter's disturbing prediction, the priest's usually jovial demeanor had been replaced by a palpable concern. "Heinrich, my friend," Father Koller said, his Bavarian accent thick with worry. "Perhaps it would be best if young Emma spent less time observing the neighbors and more time devoted to her prayers. The Lord bestows gifts upon us, yes, but sometimes the devil can subtly corrupt even the most innocent abilities toward darker ends." This suggestion deeply troubled Heinrich. He had always been a practical man, more interested in the science of brewing than the mysteries of faith. Yet even he could not disregard the unsettling accuracy of Emma's prediction. That evening, he sat his daughter down for a serious conversation. "Emma, you must tell me the truth. How did you know about Mr. Dietrich?" Emma looked at her father with those enormous gray eyes, her expression as calm and analytical as ever. "I observe. I count. I remember. Mr. Dietrich's behavior altered in predictable ways. When an individual increases their alcohol consumption by 37% over a 17-day period, while simultaneously decreasing their food intake by approximately 20%, cardiac stress becomes inevitable. I calculated the most probable time of failure based on his age, weight, and observed symptoms." Heinrich felt his blood run cold. His 11-year-old daughter was speaking like a seasoned physician, or something far more unsettling. "But Emma, how could you know all these specific details about Mr. Dietrich's eating and drinking habits?" "I observe everything, Papa," Emma replied. "Every day, every person, every pattern." Her voice remained matter-of-fact, but there was something in her eyes that made Heinrich deeply uncomfortable. "Would you like me to inform you of the other calculations I have made?" Heinrich quickly shook his head. He had no desire to know what else his daughter had calculated about their neighbors' lives and deaths. But as he tucked Emma into bed that night, he couldn't shake the chilling feeling that his family was teetering on the precipice of something far darker than mere mathematical curiosity. The February snow continued its silent descent outside their small house, muffling the sounds of the German quarter, and creating an insulated world where secrets could be meticulously hidden and subtle observations made without detection. Emma lay quietly in her narrow bed, her extraordinary mathematical mind processing the day's data and meticulously calculating probabilities that no 11-year-old should be able to comprehend, and certainly no 11-year-old should ever wish to know. In the weeks following Johann Dietrich's death, the atmosphere in Milwaukee's German quarter shifted, much like the unpredictable winds off Lake Michigan. Emma continued her daily observations, but now her parents watched her with escalating apprehension as she sat by the kitchen window, her gray eyes tracking the movements of their neighbors with mechanical precision. The child who had once been their greatest source of pride had transformed into a source of deep, unsettling worry. The brewing community was bound by necessity. Men relied on each other for work, wives sewed, ate companionship during the long winters, and children played together in the narrow streets between the red brick buildings. Yet, Emma had never quite integrated into this social fabric. While other children engaged in games and shared stories, she preferred solitary contemplation, counting, calculating, and observing the world around her with that profound, unsettling intensity. Greta began to notice that Emma's observations were becoming both more detailed and more profoundly disturbing. The child would casually remark that Mrs. Weber had been secretly meeting with Mr. Kellner behind the brewery on Tuesday afternoons for 6 consecutive weeks, or that the Schneider family consistently buried something in their backyard every Sunday after church. When Greta, with growing apprehension, questioned how Emma could possibly acquire such information, the girl would simply explain that she had observed the patterns and meticulously calculated the probabilities. "People assume they are being discreet," Emma stated one March morning, as she methodically buttered her bread, "but they adhere to patterns just like numbers." She continued, "Mrs. Weber consistently informs her husband she is visiting her sister on Tuesday afternoons. Yet she takes 127 steps to Mr. Kellner's residence instead of 349 steps to her sister's. The Schneiders' inner objects wrapped in cloth precisely 73 centimeters apart in a grid formation. They believe no one is watching, but I am always observing. Hinrich had heard enough. That evening, after Emma was asleep, he spoke earnestly with his wife about their daughter's increasingly troubling behavior. Greta, this cannot persist. Emma is becoming unnatural. Children should not perceive such things, and they certainly should not articulate them with such cold detachment. Greta nodded, her hands trembling as she mended one of Hinrich's work shirts. I am afraid, Hinrich, not of Emma, but of what the community will perceive. Already, the neighbors regard us strangely. Mrs. Brennan deliberately crossed the street yesterday when she observed my approach. And Father Koller, he has not visited us since Johann's death. Their fears were soon confirmed. 3 days later, Emma made another of her chilling mathematical announcements. She was assisting her mother with dinner preparations when she abruptly ceased peeling potatoes and looked up with that familiar calculating expression. Mrs. Weber will be discovered tomorrow at 11 in the morning. Her husband will locate her with Mr. Kellner in the brewery office. There will be violence. Greta dropped her paring knife. Emma, no, you must not utter such things. But Emma continued, with the same mathematical certainty she applied to her arithmetic lessons. Mrs. Weber has been arriving at the brewery 7 minutes earlier each week for 6 consecutive weeks. Mr. Kellner has been remaining 33 minutes later each day. Tomorrow, Mr. Weber will return from his delivery route 47 minutes early because his horse is developing lameness in her left front leg. I have observed her gait deteriorating for 11 days. The convergence of these 3 variables renders discovery inevitable. Heinrich, who had been listening from the doorway, felt his chest tighten with an icy dread. His daughter was not merely observing their neighbors. She was predicting their futures with terrifying accuracy. Emma, how do you know about Mr. Weber's horse? I count her steps as she passes our house, Emma replied. On March 1st, she favored her right leg 53% of the time. Today, it was 68%. Tomorrow, the lameness will be sufficiently severe to reduce the delivery route's speed by 47 minutes, causing Mr. Weber to return prematurely. The following day unfolded precisely as Emma had calculated. Wilhelm Weber discovered his wife Anna in a compromising situation with brewery owner Ernst Kellner. The ensuing confrontation left Kellner with a broken nose and 3 fractured ribs, while Anna was beaten so severely that Dr. Muller had to be summoned. The scandal sent shockwaves through the tight-knit German community. But what disturbed people even more was the growing realization that little Emma Richter had somehow predicted the entire sequence of events. Word spread rapidly through the neighborhood. The pale girl with the mathematical mind had not only foretold Johann Dietrich's death, but had also foreseen the Weber-Kellner scandal with unsettling precision. People began to whisper about the strange child who sat at her window, observing and calculating, and somehow knowing things that no child should know. The Richter family found themselves increasingly isolated. Former friends avoided them at church. Children were forbidden from playing near their house, and even the shopkeepers in the German quarter began to treat them with barely concealed suspicion. Hinrich's position at the brewery became precarious. His fellow workers regarded him with unease, and Ernst Kellner, still recuperating from his beating, made it unequivocally clear that the Richter family was no longer welcome at company social events. But Emma seemed oblivious to the escalating hostility around her. She continued her daily observations, her mathematical mind processing data, and meticulously calculating probabilities. She began keeping a leather journal, filling its pages with numbers, dates, and observations that her parents dared not read. The sight of their 11-year-old daughter bent over her calculations, meticulously writing in neat columns of figures, filled them with an unnameable dread. As winter slowly gave way to spring, their isolation deepened. The German quarter, which had once felt like a comforting home, now seemed hostile and menacing. Hinrich began to contemplate the unimaginable, leaving Milwaukee, abandoning the life they had painstakingly built, and starting anew somewhere far from the whispers, the fear, and the terrible accuracy of their daughter's predictions. But Emma was not yet finished with her calculations. The worst was still to come, and her mathematical mind had already begun processing the data that would lead to the darkest secrets of all. As April arrived in Milwaukee, bringing with it the first tentative warmth after the brutal winter, Emma's journal grew thicker with her precise notations. The leather-bound book had become her constant companion, and she filled its pages with increasingly complex calculations that extended far beyond simple arithmetic. Her parents had begun quietly packing their belongings in preparation for leaving Wisconsin, hoping to escape before Emma's next prediction could shatter more lives. But that morning, as spring sunlight streamed through their kitchen window, Emma made an announcement that would shake the very foundations of their community. "Papa," she said, looking up from her journal with those calculating gray eyes, "I need to show you something important. My calculations have revealed a pattern that explains everything." Heinrich, who had been dreading this moment for weeks, reluctantly sat down across from his daughter. Emma opened her journal to a section filled with detailed charts, maps, and numerical sequences that looked more like the work of a seasoned investigator than an 11-year-old child. "For 26 months, I have been observing and recording the behavior patterns of 43 adults in our community." Emma began with her characteristic clinical precision. "Initially, I believed the patterns were random variations, but when I analyzed the data systematically, I discovered correlations that indicate organized criminal activity." Heinrich felt his blood run cold. "Emma, what are you saying?" Emma consulted her charts with the methodical precision of a mathematics professor. 7 men in our community have been meeting secretly every Wednesday at midnight in the basement of Kellner's Brewery. I calculated their movement patterns based on observed deviations from normal behavior, timing inconsistencies in their stated activities, and physical evidence of their gatherings. She pointed to a detailed map of the German quarter marked with symbols and measurements. "Mr. Steinberg tells his wife he works late on Wednesday nights, but he leaves the mill at exactly the same time as the other 6 men and walks to the brewery using a route that avoids the main streets. The pattern has been consistent for 26 months, with only 3 exceptions that correlated with illness or family emergencies." Heinrich stared at the map, recognizing the names Emma had marked. Wilhelm Weber, Ernst Kellner's brother, Hans Zimmermann, Franz's cousin Otto Steinberg, Klaus Brennan, Margaret's deceased husband until 3 months ago, Gustav Wolf, and Hermann Kruger. "Emma, how could you possibly know about secret meetings?" "I observe everything, Papa. Every night, every movement, every deviatit, on from established patterns." Emma turned to another page filled with numerical calculations. "But the meetings are not the most significant discovery. My calculations indicate these 7 men have been involved in systematic theft from the brewery operations, with estimated losses of approximately $47,000 over 26 months. Heinrich's hands began to tremble. The sum Emma mentioned represented more money than most families in the German quarter would earn in a lifetime. "How could you calculate such a thing?" Emma's explanation was delivered with the same mathematical precision she applied to all her observations. "I noticed discrepancies between the reported beer production figures and the actual output I calculated based on observed deliveries, ingredients purchased, and waste disposal patterns. The difference indicated systematic theft, but I needed to identify the perpetrators." She pointed to detailed charts tracking the behavior patterns of the 7 men. These individuals all showed consistent patterns of increased spending that did not correlate with their reported incomes. Mr. Weber purchased new furniture worth approximately $300. Mr. Steinberg sent money to relatives in Germany. I observed him at the post office 12 times with packages too large for normal correspondence. The pattern was consistent across all 7 men. Heinrich realized he was looking at undeniable evidence of a criminal conspiracy that his 11-year-old daughter had uncovered through her obsessive observations and mathematical analysis. But Emma was not finished with her revelations. The theft operation required inside knowledge of brewery security and access to the financial records. Emma continued. My calculations indicated the involvement of someone in management. The patterns pointed to Ernst Kellner himself as the organizer of the theft ring. The final piece of Emma's revelation struck Hinrich like a physical blow. Ernst Kellner, the very brewery owner who had been systematically isolating them from the community, was allegedly the mastermind of a major theft operation involving 7 men from their own neighborhood. The precision of Emma's analysis, the mathematical certainty of her conclusions, and the detailed evidence she had meticulously compiled through months of observation, all pointed to a truth that was both incredible and terrifying. Emma, these are very serious accusations. Are you certain of your calculations? Emma consulted her journal one final time. The mathematical probability is 96%. But Papa, there is something else. Something that explains why Mr. Kellner has been attempting to isolate our family from the community. Hinrich felt his chest tighten with dread. What do you mean? Mr. Kellner knows that I observe everything. He has been watching me watch him. 3 weeks ago, he approached our house twice at night and stood outside for 17 minutes each time, as if calculating whether I might have discovered his secret. His behavior indicates he suspects I am aware of the theft operation. The realization that Emma's mathematical abilities had not only uncovered a criminal conspiracy, but had also made her a target, filled Hinrich with a terror he had never before experienced. His daughter's obsessive observations and calculating mind had revealed secrets that powerful men would kill to protect. Emma closed her journal and looked at her father with those unsettling gray eyes. Papa, my calculations indicate that we are in significant danger. Mr. Kellner and the others cannot allow me to continue making observations. The mathematical probability of them taking action against our family is 84%, with peak likelihood occurring within the next 72 hours. Hinrich understood that Emma's final prediction was not about fire or suicide or adultery, but about their own family's survival. Her mathematical mind had uncovered a truth that rendered their continued existence in Milwaukee impossible, and the men she had exposed would not hesitate to eliminate the one witness who could destroy them all. That evening, Hinrich made a decision that would save his family's lives. Using the detailed evidence Emma had meticulously compiled in her journal, he approached Dr. Muller under cover of darkness and shared Emma's astonishing discoveries. The physician, who had already been profoundly disturbed by Emma's unusual abilities, was stunned by the mathematical precision of her criminal investigation. Hinrich, if what Emma has calculated is true, we are looking at the largest theft operation in Milwaukee's history, Dr. Muller whispered as he examined the journal by lamplight in his office. But more importantly, if Kellner suspects that Emma knows, your family is in mortal danger. Dr. Mueller agreed to help them escape Milwaukee immediately. Utilizing his medical connections, he arranged for Hinrich to receive an emergency job offer at a brewery in distant Minnesota, providing a plausible cover for their sudden departure. They would leave that very night, before Emma's 72-hour prediction could come to pass. As the Richter family loaded their few belongings into Dr. Mueller's wagon under the cloak of darkness, Emma made one final observation that would haunt Hinrich for the rest of his life. Papa, in approximately 6 months, the theft operation will be discovered through other means. Mr. Kellner will face justice, but 3 of the 7 men will not survive the investigation. The mathematical probabilities are quite clear. Hinrich shuddered as he lifted his daughter into the wagon. Even as they fled for their lives, Emma was calculating the future consequences of the conspiracy she had uncovered. Her prediction would prove accurate in every detail. By winter, a federal investigation would indeed expose the theft ring. Ernst Kellner would be arrested and convicted, and 3 of his accomplices would die under suspicious circumstances that were never fully explained. But on that dark May night in 1873, as their wagon rolled through the sleeping streets of Milwaukee's German Quarter, Heinrich could only think about how his daughter's extraordinary mathematical mind had both saved their lives and utterly destroyed the only home they had ever known in America. The Richter family vanished from Milwaukee in the early hours of May 2, 1873, leaving behind only whispered stories and unanswered questions. Dr. Mueller officially reported that they had received an emergency family summons back to Bavaria, but the few people who bothered to inquire noted that no ship passenger records could be found to confirm their departure from America. What the residents of the German quarter never learned was that Heinrich, Greta, and Emma Richter had indeed traveled to Minnesota, where Heinrich found work at a small brewery in the town of New Ulm. Dr. Mueller had sworn to keep their location secret, understanding that Emma's mathematical abilities would always make her a target for those who read the exposure of their secrets. In New Ulm, the Richter family attempted to construct a new life, far from the whispers and fears that had driven them from Milwaukee. Heinrich found the brewery work familiar and satisfying, while Greta slowly began to rebuild the domestic routines that had been shattered by Emma's disturbing predictions. But Emma herself remained unchanged. Her mathematical mind continued to observe, calculate, and record human behavior patterns with the same mechanical precision that had made her both famous and feared. Dr. Mueller maintained correspondence with the family for several months, reporting that Emma had begun working with a mathematics professor at a nearby college, who was fascinated by her unusual abilities. The professor, a German immigrant named Dr. Hermann Weiss, approached Emma's condition from a scientific rather than supernatural perspective, helping her understand and channel her observational skills in ways that might prove beneficial rather than destructive. But the most significant revelation arrived in November of 1873, when Dr. Mueller received a letter from Heinrich containing Emma's final prediction about the Milwaukee theft operation. As she had calculated with mathematical precision, federal investigators had indeed uncovered Ernst Kellner's conspiracy. Kellner was arrested and convicted of embezzling over $50,000 from multiple brewery operations. Wilhelm Weber, who had been Kellner's primary accomplice, was found dead in his home under circumstances that were officially ruled a suicide, but which many suspected were something far more sinister. Otto Steinberg and Hermann Kruger also died within weeks of the investigation's conclusion. Steinberg in what appeared to be a drunken accident, and Kruger from what Dr. Mueller diagnosed as a sudden heart attack that bore suspicious similarities to the symptoms of certain pious.
Emma's mathematical analysis of the criminal conspiracy had been accurate in every detail, including her prediction that not all of the conspirators would survive the eventual discovery of their crimes. The precision of her calculations, even from hundreds of miles away and months in advance, confirmed what Heinrich had come to understand about his daughter's extraordinary and terrifying abilities. The German quarter of Milwaukee slowly recovered from the scandal and tragedy of 1873. The brewery theft investigation brought unwelcome attention from federal authorities, but it also exposed a level of corruption that had been quietly damaging the community for years. New families moved into the houses left empty by death and departure, and the tight-knit community gradually rebuilt itself around more honest foundations. But the story of Emma Richter, the pale girl with the calculating gray eyes, who could predict death and expose secrets through mathematical observation, became part of the neighborhood's whispered folklore. Parents used her story to warn their children about the dangers of knowing too much, while adults quietly wondered what other secrets might be hiding behind the ordinary facades of their neighbors' lives. Father Koller, who had initially blessed Emma's abilities as divine gifts, later confessed to Dr. Mueller that the girl's mathematical predictions had shaken his faith in ways he could not explain. The priest had begun to question whether some knowledge was too dangerous for human minds to possess, and whether Emma's condition represented a blessing or a curse that had been visited upon their community. Just when we thought we'd seen it all, the horror in Milwaukee's German quarter intensifies. If this story is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit that like button to support our content, and don't forget subscribe to never miss stories like this. Let's discover together what happens next in the most disturbing historical cases America has to offer. Dr. Mueller's final letter to the Richter family was written in the spring of 1874, nearly a year after their departure from Milwaukee. In it, he reported that the German quarter had largely returned to normal, but that Emma's story continued to circulate in whispered conversations among the older residents. He also shared a disturbing development that had emerged during the federal investigation of the brewery theft. Government investigators had discovered that Emma's journal, which Hinrich had left with Dr. Muller as evidence, contained mathematical calculations that extended far beyond the immediate criminal conspiracy. Emma had apparently been tracking and analyzing behavioral patterns throughout the entire German immigrant community, creating detailed profiles of dozens of families and predicting future events with remarkable accuracy. The federal investigators, trained in criminal analysis, were both impressed and disturbed by the sophistication of Emma's observational methods. "Your daughter's mind works in ways that professional investigators might envy," Dr. Muller wrote. "But I confess that I am grateful she is far from Milwaukee. The precision of her observations and the mathematical certainty of her predictions represent a kind of knowledge that I fear is too dangerous for any community to possess." The final mention of Emma Richter in any historical record comes from a brief notation in the New Ulm College Mathematics Department records from 1875. Professor Hermann Weiss reported that his special student had demonstrated unprecedented abilities in statistical analysis and behavioral prediction, but that her family had decided to relocate once again for personal reasons. After that entry, Emma Richter disappeared from history as completely as she had vanished from Milwaukee on that dark night in May of 1873. What happened to the girl who could calculate human behavior with mathematical precision remains unknown. Some researchers have theorized that families like the Richters, possessing children with unusual abilities, deliberately maintained their anonymity to protect themselves from both scientific exploitation and community persecution. Emma's story represents one of the few documented cases where such abilities were recorded in sufficient detail to understand their scope and implications. This mystery shows us that the human mind remains one of our greatest enigmas, capable of developing extraordinary abilities that challenge our understanding of intelligence, observation, and prediction. In 1873, Emma Richter's mathematical approach to human behavior was seen as either divine or demonic. But modern science recognizes that conditions like Savant syndrome, autism spectrum disorders, and hyperthymesia can indeed create minds that process information in ways that seem almost supernatural to those who don't understand the neurological mechanisms involved. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed? Or do you think Emma's abilities extended even further than what we discovered? Leave your comment below and let us know if you've ever encountered someone with similar extraordinary mental abilities. If you enjoyed this tale and want more horror stories like this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who loves mysteries. These historical cases remind us that the most frightening truths are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right mind to calculate their terrible secrets. The case of Emma Richter demonstrates that sometimes the most terrifying discoveries come not from supernatural forces, but from the relentless application of mathematical logic to human behavior. In a world where we believe our secrets are safe, the existence of minds capable of such precise observation and calculation reminds us that privacy may be nothing more than an illusion, and that the patterns we think we hide may be visible to those who know how to look and how to count.